So, hi everybody, it's T. Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Oracle of the Self. Today we're going to begin our interpretation of the ChangeWorks profile that you are all invited to complete for Exploration 6, which is on the subject of managing myself. Pretty much we're looking at managing someone's time and energy. And as we work our way through this interpretation series, I'd like to make sure that I'm also giving you guys lots of insights about how you can go about improving whatever your plotting happens to be. For those of you who are listening to the call, who have not filled out the profile yet, underneath this video, you will find a link to the profile. Please take a moment to fill that out. You'll immediately receive your results. And then as you're listening to these interpretation sessions, you'll be able to figure out how it's all working for you. So with that, let's kind of jump in here. Let's look at activity number 1, which was identifying my core goals to focus my efforts on what matters most. Now, this back end of the statement is really just to give you a little bit of flesh to the subject. The real activity is identifying your core goals. And so when we think about where on the change grade is someone going to do the best job of identifying their core goals, hopefully by now you guys can feel the energies that are involved in that particular activity. So let me go ahead, got you all selected already. Let me go ahead and view the change grid. And just as a reminder, so you guys know what you're looking at, this is the change grid composite. So all the layers all at once. You will see that there is a large triangle and there is a large diamond. The diamond is the ideal location on the change grid. And in the case of this particular activity, the ideal location would be an analytical driver. Now, why would that be? Well, first, you want to be a driver because you're trying to do something. Look at it again, identifying my core goals, to focus my efforts on what matters most. You're trying to make something happen. You're trying to go somewhere. So that's that driver energy front and center. But how do you go about driving this particular activity? Some activities are going to do best if they've got more of an amiable kind of a secondary energy coming from a place of caring. Sometimes we're going to get to where we want to go by being a little bit more expressive, enthusiastic, all those sorts of things that happen ever so slightly up grid. Sometimes we just need to drive, just push on through no matter what to get us where we're trying to go. But sometimes it's important for us to say, this is an activity that requires some actual thought. We got to figure something out. There's an analytical element to it. And in the case of identifying my core goals, you guys can, I hopefully agree that there is an analytical element that is definitely required in order to perform this task well. Agree, disagree? Where are you guys at on it?
Agree. No, I agree. But T, with your explanations, I'm going to start probably guessing at my change grid responses as opposed to just doing it off the top.
Yeah, well, but here's the thing that this has come up with a couple of people I've spoken to in the past week or so around this. One of the things that happens is people become more and more familiar with the change grid, and they become more and more fluent in the principles of tension management, is that they lose sight of what the change grid is actually supposed to do. The change grid is supposed to capture a psychological moment in time, and that moment is now. And so often I'm finding that people are filling out their change grids and they're answering based on how they usually are, how they generally are, maybe how they ideally are, instead of just plain how they are at this particular moment. And so I would say to your point, David, is that whatever was going on when you filled this out was going on when you filled this out. And right. I think it's really just fine to look, so many of us that are on the call or listening to the call, we're in the human development profession. A lot of people are coaches, and coaches, perhaps more than the other disciplines, have it really drilled into them that you have to meet the client where they are. And that's what we're really doing. We're going like, where are you right now? Now, once we know where you are and you kind of know where we're trying to get you to, then it becomes just a matter of saying, like, how do I most effectively help this individual or help myself in the case of the Oracle of the Self to make that movement happen. All right. And so I will just encourage all of you, whenever you're filling out a change grid, be in the moment, answer using the perceptions you have at that specific moment in time. In fact, let me do something a little different than we normally do. I'm going to show you a couple of people's profiles. Instead of looking at the activities, we're going to look at the people. And so, if this hasn't come up before, there's two different kinds of change grids we can look at. We can look at an activity grid, which is what we normally do. We look at the activity and how all the respondents are plotting as far as that activity is concerned. But we can also look at the individual grid or the respondent grid and see how is that individual responding to all of the activities. And so let me go ahead and just kind of choose one. I want to look at all the activities rather than looking at but you can't look at everybody in all activities all at once. You can if you're running the report to print it out, but it just becomes a visual, garbled mess if you try to do all these things at once. But let me just go ahead and say, oh, actually, I want to look at Tom's. So Tom and Anja have both very interesting grids. Let's just click on Tom. This is okay with you, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, my assumption is that you guys understand if you're participating in the actual calls, you are
Yes.
by nature that granting permission to be put under the spotlight. So, all right. So you kind of see Tom is in a rather nice concentration of activities. Yeah, there's our concentration of areas on the change grid. You'll notice that across the whole activity set, his perceived abilities ranged from a 7 up to a 10. The level of challenge also ranged from a 7 up to a 10. So he's kind of like in this relatively tight sort of range. And so we can pretty much, draw a few conclusions from this. For example, we certainly know that we'll look first at I'll look at style first. So change that background. He's outgrid about everything. Outgrid is where the driver energies really live. And so we could say Tom is very much experiencing a driver energy across all the things. Notice that they're all red numbers. So the color of the number is a reflection of the importance. So he considers these all to be important enough. And you'll notice that the circles are also all red, which indicates that he thinks they're all pretty big, things that need to really be done. And so I like that I'm seeing some consistency in the plotting, some concentration to all this. So his grid would indicate that there really is just an opportunity for refinement. So I promise you, if you've got everything in the driver quadrant, you sure can't be too far away from the ideal locations. And so it really is just about tweaking things here, looking at things a little bit differently. Sometimes to boost ability. Maybe we need to lower some challenge. Maybe we need to boost some challenge. But this is all a very coachable kind of a plotting. Now, let me just go ahead. Oh, one more thing I want to point out about him is that his change grid shows that when it comes to this entire activity set, every single thing is in engagement. So these are all actively being worked on, expressed, deployed, whatever word you want to attach to the whole thing. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you one more. Let's go back to the composite change grid. And I'm going to show you Anja's profile here for just a second. Anja, I assume that's okay.
Are we still going to be married after this?
You'll see. Here we go. Let's look at the change grid. Now, you need to remember Tom's. So Tom's were a little bit further out grid, and there was a little bit more of an up-down stretch, but they very much are still plotting everything in that driver thing. Most activities are in the engagement, but notice that Anja considers these activities to all be of moderate size. So her circles are yellow instead of Tom's, which were red. And so if I was working with the two of them together, it'd be interesting to say, I wonder why Tom thinks it's such a big task. And I wonder why Anja thinks it's moderate size. And is there anything there that they can do to, support one another because they're a married couple? And so is there an opportunity there? They all agree, or they both agree that everything is of equal importance. Anja has a couple of things that are plotting a little bit further in grid. Now, her general in grid lean is more of an indication that she tends to approach these things with appreciation for a heart kind of a space, that there are other people that are going to be involved in some of these activities, and that has to be kind of factored in there. Tom's a little bit further out grid. The people that might be involved are a little bit more incidental to him than they are to Anja. And so you guys with me on this? So but still you see a strong concentration of activities. So a tight range. Anja said her ability is between a 7 and a 9, and the challenge is between a 6 and a 9. These are really tight plottings, and everything on Anja's grid shows that she is either an amiable driver or on the border of the amiable driver with two other secondary energies, some expressive and most of them analytical. Where if I go back to Tom's for just a second, la 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 la. Look at Tom. View the change grid. So Tom is out there, more engaged. Everything for him may be on the border of that amiable energy, but he's got a lot more expressive energy attached to some of these activities, or a lot more analytical energy. But these four right here, he's just a balanced driver around these things. Now, obviously, if I was doing a one-on-one reading, we could do a deep dive into it. I just wanted you to see that one of the things that I'm noticing about your guys' plottings is this concentration of things that we might be looking at. All right, thoughts about that before I make my big point? So, yeah.
I find it fascinating. He's got 4. I want to know what 4, 10, 11, and 12 are, because I'm more spread out with those. My 4 is close.
Sure. 4, 10, 11,
Like
and
10 and
12 is
11
about
here.
enforcing non-negotiable boundaries. And then 10, 11, 12 is about managing the expectations and responsibilities I place upon myself, building my resilience, surrounding myself with people who support me in reaching my goals. So he's a nice balanced driver about all those. And yeah, we might look at a couple of them and say, well, it could be a little bit one step down grid or one step out grid or whatever, but he's not far off of anything. And being a balanced driver is not a bad place to be. Remember, when we choose ideal locations, we're saying just based on our processing of this particular activity, we think the ideal location would be whatever. But that doesn't mean that neighboring locations are bad. It's just going to have some subtle differences to it that's maybe part personality and maybe part how someone has developed their strategies for dealing with certain kinds of issues. So my point here is that I'm seeing an interesting concentration of activities, or the plotting of the activities overall. Thoughts, questions? I was going to show you some surprises. Ready for some surprises?
Yeah.
All right, Brian, Mr. Wangi.
Mwangi.
Mwangi. Well, I got to choose someone.
Mwangi.
Mwangi.
So I did better than Brian, right?
Oh yeah, because it's a competition. Notice that for Brian, he still has a concentration of these activities, but compared to Tom or Anja, he is most definitely further down grid. The thing that strikes, which by the way, being further down grid just means that the ratio of perceived ability versus perceived challenge is favoring ability. So where you guys were showing kind of more of an overall balance between those two perceptions, he's basically saying, look, no, my ability for all of these is a 10 or an 11. The range of challenge is as low as a 5, which is still moderate, but nevertheless low as a 5. Oops, I got one up there that's a 10. By the way, that is enforcing non-negotiable boundaries. And so, but the thing that strikes me about Brian's plottings is that rather than having all the activity numbers be red, which is true for both Tom and Anja's grids, he's got some that are yellow. He's got some of these where he's saying the importance of a lot of these activities is moderate, not high.
Interesting.
So if I was going to be doing a one-on-one reading with Brian, I'd be very curious to know what these relative rankings he put together in terms of the importance of an activity. Like why is activity number 1, identifying my core goals, only moderately important, but enforcing my boundaries is very important. Or number 3, sticking to my plan is very, so it's really important to plan my day and to stick to my plan and to enforce my boundaries, but it really isn't, as important that I identify my core goals.
Yeah, some of these I like do all the time, so it's kind of
Yep.
more like a routine ritualized, whereas, kind of the upheavals that I've been dealing with as of late challenges some of these ritualized kinds of activities, and so
That's right.
it's looking a little bit like, yeah, you probably need a different game plan,
Yeah.
because there's some of that can throw me like completely off.
Well, truly, number 4 is the one that gets
Yeah,
under your skin. So
yeah.
you are a driven driver, an amiable driven driver, but nevertheless a driven driver when it comes to enforcing your boundaries. It's like you're saying to the world, look, I got everything I'm doing under control when it comes to my personal management, time and energy management for myself. Stop messing with my energy.
I just had that conversation because, my challenge is always with family members in general, particularly those who are in poor health, but then they always call on me. And so then it's as if they don't want to hear, and I'm not telling them, I'm speaking with them, and then they get, kind of frustrated. So
Yeah.
the conversation we had as of late is, this idea you're calling on me with all of this, and it's almost like you're comfortable with dumping on me, but then you don't want to hear. So
Yeah.
let's stop doing that.
Yeah. And that's what your
Unless
grid
you
shows.
really want to hear.
Right.
And so,
yeah. So you're calling them out as far as this particular, but your boundaries are concerned. And so I'm bringing this up just to kind of say that even though there might be a difference between Tom and Anja and Brian's overall plotting, the pattern is still very tight for each one of them. And that's a very, very different looking change grid than one of the ones I'm going to show you in a minute. I don't want to leave anyone out. If anyone else would like to see or share their personal grid, I'm happy to put it up. Anybody? So Chris, I know Kathy, haven't filled it out yet, but David, you want yours thrown up? Tim, did you fill it out yet? Nope. So I'm happy to show anyone.
I'd like to look.
All right, let me go ahead. I will uncheck Brian. Let's look at David instead. View the change grid. And, oh, very interesting. He still has a strong concentration, but notice that rather than having a tight cluster sort of a plotting in one place, or a vertical plotting like we saw with Tom's kind of stretch, this is a horizontal plotting. And so pretty much he is reporting balanced perception. So not just things that are in general thing. He's going to like, oh no, that's an 8-8. Activities number 4 and 9 and 5 right there. That's 8-8. 2 and 11 is 9-9. 1, 10 and 12 is 10-10. And so we're seeing a lot more of a horizontal sort of a plotting here. And that, by the way, puts his change grid much tighter to the heart line of power, right? If we drew that horizontal line right through the center where totally balanced perceptions are, that's the heart line. And that's a great, great, great place to be, as long as you're still following through and getting stuff done. Because remember that the change grid is showing you potential for things being done based on your perceptions. And by the way, let me just say one other thing I wanted to say about the others, and that is that remember that when you are looking at a change grid, you are looking at a mirror that is reflecting back to you the conversations that you are having with yourself about yourself as far as these specific activities are concerned. If I'm in my role as a human development professional, I am able to see the conversations that you're having with yourself. And that very often means I don't need to hear the conversations that you're having with yourself. And one of the greatest things is that when you're doing talk therapy or people are just working their way conversationally through something, takes a long time because everything is linear. You got to start the story and work your way through the story and tell the story. When you're looking at your own change grid or looking at someone else's change grid, as we are right now, we are seeing all of these conversations simultaneously. And so I can tell you which voices in David's head are speaking more strongly, like 1, 10, and 12. You got to believe, okay, he's an amiable, driven driver about those things. That's a very different tone than activity number 6, which is going to be more of an expressive, amiable driver. An expressive, amiable, creating an environment that minimizes interruptions and maximizes productivity. Having this amiable contributing factor and that expressive contributing factor would tell me that he is sensitive to the fact that that environment may very well be involving other people, and that he needs to keep it something that's a little bit more upbeat, energetic, whatever, only slightly, because again, he's so close to the heart line. But nevertheless, he'd like it to be a nice place, an interesting place, a welcoming place. But it also has to be one that's supporting him in things he's trying to do efficiently. David, does that match for you?
Yep,
Yep.
it certainly does. But you know, the interesting thing is that my challenge is all between 8 and 10.
Yeah. Right. And so this is all a manageable challenge range. I think it's interesting, though, a broader report of range and ability. For whatever reason, activity number 7, you just gave himself a solid 6. Now, there's nothing bad about a 6, but relatively speaking, you're saying this is the one that I'm reporting the lowest ability to really do. So what's that one? Controlling distractions associated with my use of technology. All right, then. So,
I've given up.
yeah, well, and this is one of the things that if you were working with a coach, a consultant, a trainer or whatever, they might want to go look at it, go like, look, we got to give him some additional insights, skills, tools, resources that can help him better manage his technology and control. Like, for example, in one of the more recent releases of the iPhone software, there's something that's called screen time. It'll actually tell you exactly how much time you're spending online per day. And it'll give you
Yep.
a whole timeline that shows certain time blocks where you happen to be using more, well, you're using your phone. I would hope there's a similar thing available on your computer as well. I gotta believe those kinds of things exist. So, but point is, there may very well be ways to help in this particular thing. Let's see, Chris also wanted to see his, so let's go ahead and share Chris's for just a second. David, we'll go to Chris, view the change grid. Oh, looky, looky, looky. Again, we're seeing a nice concentration of activities, plotting even further out grid than Tom's were plotting. So you see this kind of like arrowhead. Get out of Chris's way. Okay, he's moving. He says these are all important. None of them are of large size. They're all moderate. Even one, activity number 11, is pretty small in relative size. Not only is he engaged in doing these things, he's actively executing on these things. So I would say to him, your grid indicates that you are on top of things when it comes to your time and territory. David and I were talking about sales. So my head goes time and territory, time and territory. No, time and energy management. Does that hold right for you, Chris? Can you unmute and share a little bit there?
Absolutely. It's spot on. It's spot on. It's like an intense focus right now, and commitment to making things happen.
Yep. And look at how tight his ranges are. Ability between 8 and a 10, and the challenge between a 7 and a 10. This is a really tight concentration. Now, some of the ideal locations are going to be being an analytical driver, an express, that may be, but he's darn close to ideal locations on all of them. All right. You guys with me on the pattern that we're seeing here? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to show you another one. And that one happens to be mine. I'm Ferd Burfel. I do my best, and I've worked very hard over these 40 years, that whenever I'm filling out a change grid, I want to make sure that I am absolutely in the moment, being as accurate as I can, as authentic as I can with where my head is at that particular moment in time. This is my change grid.
Wow. That's a spread.
Sorry to
This-
see that. That doesn't look good.
Well,
I think this is someone who is very thoughtful, takes a great deal of time and care with people. He's very loved, even though he's strict and strong in his opinions, but he's very much respected and admired.
That's T.
What?
I-
Fred, it's Ferd. I thought it was Fred.
I appreciate
my.
I appreciate that. I wanted to show you this so you guys could really understand it's okay for you to be in the moment when you figure it out. Now, I've got no reason to believe that you guys weren't all in the moment when you filled out your change grids, and your change grids really are an accurate, authentic representation or presentation of your perceptions of these activities at that particular moment in time. Now, if you listened or you attended the last call, you watched me do this. I never showed you the result, but you watched me do this. And I think it was David who pointed out a couple of times, you're way up in stress about that. So as you get more and more comfortable with the change grid, more and more fluent in it, it's amazing how just hearing someone's perceptions, you know exactly where they are on the change grid. So you might have heard me. Sometimes I think I'm really no, and I was debating with myself as I was figuring it all out. But this is an accurate reflection of my where my head was when I filled this out last week. Now, would it be different if I filled it out today? I got to tell you, things might shift around a little bit, but I'm still in the same mind space I was a week ago. And I'll share with you, just because this is where, we ultimately want to get, where is this coming from? But one of the things that I'm very much dealing with right now is I am changing a medication. And that change in the medication is triggering all sorts of strange responses. And I'm going through what's been called antidepressant discontinuation syndrome. So it takes a very long time if you're going to try to reduce a dose of an antidepressant, or you're trying to get off of it altogether. Certain antidepressants are far more challenging than others. Bottom line, you've got a situation when you're taking antidepressants where your neurotransmitters have been very much affected by that antidepressant, and it's done whatever it is that hopefully it was designed to do. So that may very well mean that in the absence of that medication, you may very well have your neurotransmitters going like, wait, what's happening? What's going on here? What do you want me to do? And it creates a real interesting set of responses that they've now decided to label as a syndrome. It's been on for a long time. It's so easy to start taking an antidepressant. It's very difficult to stop taking one. And part of it is because of these responses. And so I think that's what you're looking at here, is a reflection of that. But because I was willing to be absolutely in the moment and say, look, I've been in this industry for a long time. When it's something like identifying my core goals to focus on, do you have any idea how many courses I've taught in goal setting? Hey, I can't begin to estimate the number of hours, but I rated my ability as a 6 and the challenge as a 9. So if I was going to go like, hey, usually this is how I am. Yeah, usually I might be someplace downgrade because I am so fluent at it and on. But that is not the me today. And when it comes to something like number 10, managing the expectations and responsibilities I place upon myself, look, generally on a good day, whatever, I may be doing that just fine. But right now, because of what I'm going through, I gave my ability a 2 and the challenge a 12. And so there is this horrible, stressed out, nonstop anxiety that's going on, but none of it has any subject matter. There's no content around it. It really is just that my neurochemical soup is just in shambles. And yeah. And so now, why is it important to be genuine? Can you imagine if I was working with someone who was fluent in the change grid, and they asked me to fill this out, and I answered it based on how I generally am, or how I want to be, or whatever, if it is it aspirational, is it whatever? What am I doing to their ability to actually guide me well? As
Well, you're
opposed to
frustrating it.
Right, I'm frustrating it. And then I'm going to leave that session that I paid for, and I'm going to feel like, it didn't work. That wasn't anything at all. I got to be willing to own my reality. And we're talking about perceptions here. We're not talking about how things actually are. So actually, do I have an ability to plan my day in advance to do whatever it is? Of course I do. But that doesn't mean that in every moment of every day, you're always going to be there. Sometimes you're going to be someplace different. And so I feel very comfortable sharing with you guys what I'm going through so that you can see that if we can all just say, when I'm going to fill out a change grid, I'm going to be as genuine, authentic, in the moment. I don't know what other words to describe, but you got to allow yourself to just be who you are, where you are, how you are at that particular moment in time. And the change grid is going to be spot on for
Yeah,
whatever
I
you're going.
certainly questioned a lot. When I got the results, I was like, who is this? Like, but I had to just be honest that, I'm quite tired as of late. And I had to double up or on my recovery
Yep.
because, whenever you're dealing with family, that always takes the energy right out of you in general. So,
Yep.
and when I seen the results, I started to question, like, should I take it over? Is this right? And this kind of thing. But I just let it be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's it. But by being genuine, authentic, I'm trying to help. Well, it would be trying to help whoever the professional is that I'm working with, but this is the oracle of the self. I need to help myself to to manage whatever my locations are. And so activity number 10, again, this idea about having managing expectations and responsibilities I place upon myself. Right now I'm feeling like I don't have the ability to do that, so I need downgrade maneuvers. I need to normalize, simplify, restore resources, and add resources. And again, everyone who's going through the oracle of the self either is an explorer or has been exposed to a lot of the explorer training and all that. So you have some insights about how to be able to do that. So this isn't the therapy session for me. Obviously, I do have the skills to be able to go in and look at my responses, understand where my responses are coming from, and do things that can help me move to a healthier spot on the change grid. But it's because I was absolutely upfront and honest about my ratings as I gave them to myself. All right. So again, I'm not saying you guys didn't do that. I'm encouraging you that whenever you're filling out a change grid, don't think about coulda, shoulda, woulda. Don't think about general how I am or how I want to be. Just be in the moment and answer the questions right way that you're feeling, perceiving that in that moment. Okay. Don't argue with yourself about your responses. Okay. Thoughts about that? No?
No, that makes great
No,
sense.
I appreciate your honesty on that, T, and I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
Just to just do where you are as opposed to where you think you ought to be. That's a waste of time.
That's right. Remember that the change grid is not who you are. It's never about who you are. It's only about how you happen to be responding to these particular activities at that particular moment in time. So put in place the right change grid maneuvers, and I can move to the perfect place on the change grid in a matter of minutes. It doesn't necessarily have to be a long thing, but let me just share with you what I gained by filling this out was that this is really just, it's not really so much a reflection of me when I think of the intellectual me or whatever. This is just a reflection of what I'm going through. And if I can see it and I can understand it, maybe that all by itself becomes a normalizing factor. This is to be expected when you are, changing whatever the medication happens to be. I remember years and years ago, we had a client, a very large client, and we were working with their top performers. And one of their top performers was a very interesting young man, probably in his early 30s. And he had achieved great things. He was absolutely a self-made millionaire with his work within that company. But for some reason or another, he decided to discontinue his blood pressure medication. Ryan can tell you that when you discontinue your blood pressure medication, you could go into renal failure in a matter of days.
Yeah, that's not good.
Suddenly he found himself on, what do they call it? When you have to go in for dialysis.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was daily or every other day, but whatever it is. And this was back before you could do dialysis at home. So he had to go to a dialysis clinic or lab or whatever they call it. And that was all about. And so it's not just about antidepressants. It's about deciding to stop any kind of a medication. If that medication was actually doing something for you, do you think you might notice when it stops doing what it was going to be doing for you? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, if nothing changes, then who needed it? So,
Yeah. Many of those kinds of drugs are what's called designer drugs. And so they're literally, kind of hijack your biochemistry. So to just stop it or just go off it, that's not a good thing to do.
right. There's going to be consequences for doing these kinds of things. And so again, wouldn't it have been useful for us to be able to say to him, you need to know that if you suddenly stop this or whatever, that these are the kinds of things that are very likely to start happening. And by being aware of it, that alone serves as a downgrid maneuver, right? Normalizing, simplifying, restoring resources, adding resources. By the way, some of these others are too far downgrid. I'm going to need to do something to do upgrid maneuvers and maybe some outgrid maneuvers to get all these things back where they belong. But nevertheless, okay.
So T,
Yes,
can I ask this real quickly?
sure, please,
The four uns, the unaware, unwilling, unable, unsuitable, as you're dealing with yourself in terms of like these here, because you talked about like each one of them behaviorally require like one is a counselor, counseling, one is a manager, training,
and leader.
that kind of and leader.
Yeah.
Which one is which? Because I was thinking
Yeah.
about that for myself.
Yeah, when it comes to the four uns, when you're upgrid means you are unable to do something. Are we tied to that unable? Where does that unable label come from? Well, look how you're rating your ability. You gave your ability between a 0 and a 6, and the challenge between a 6 and a 12. So this is definitely an area where you're kind of going like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. so this is the situation of being unable, in which case being the trainer is the remedy. So we got to do something to give you that ability, increase that knowledge, that skill, that experience, or give you whatever those core resources are to help you do that. And even if you think about the downgrid maneuvers, normalize, simplify, restore resources, add resources. Hopefully you can hear that those are the kinds of things that you, the trainer, could do for yourself, right? If you are outgrid, well, Now that's the problematic one. Let's do that one last. Let's say that you're too far down grid. Well, down grid issues tend to be more about awareness. Mostly it's about awareness of things changing. You're not noticing that things are changing when you're down grid. Why not? Because you perceive your ability is very high against these very low challenges. So this kind of stuff is just routine for you, predictable, under the radar, whatever it is. You're just going through the motions, autopilot, whatever you really want to attach to it. Well, what happens as you move further and further downgrade is that you quite literally will lose consciousness. Before you actually pass out, though, you might lose awareness of what's really happening around you, etc. And that is why we say the correction for being too far downgrid is you need to be better managed. So the manager in you is the one who says, my job as a manager is to make sure that you are always aware of what's going on, how well you're doing it, what needs to be done, how we're measuring it, gauging it, etc. So if you really think about what a manager does, it's always going to have that idea of awareness connected to it. And so we need to pull on the manager energy. I got to become a better manager of myself when it comes to activities 5 and 9 for sure. So monitoring my physical and mental states, of course, and saying no. Luckily for me, no is my default response. So I'm going to automatically say no to everything, and then I put the burden on you to convince me otherwise. So that's my default. But yeah, if it's too far downgrade, that's still problematic. If you are someone who's too far in grid, then what you're basically saying is, I don't have very much ability, and so I don't really do things that are very challenging, whatever. So I'm kind of existing, not necessarily living. I'm watching everybody out there achieve greatness and take great chances and feel that level of confidence that comes with mastery and all that. But you know what? That's not my world. I've got a smaller kind of range of experience and expression. And so this is an individual who needs to have some leadership input. So leaders believe in people before those people believe in themselves. They need to hear the messages of come on, step up to the plate, take the chance. I believe in you. You can do it, etc. And so this is about working with willingness. So people that are in grid tend to be unwilling to step out of that comfort zone and go out there and explore the world and do things or whatever. And so the way that I handle unwillingness is to work on you being more willing. And that's what the leader is really all about. Come on, we know you can do it. We believe in you. We're here to support you and help you every step along the way. Come on, come on, come on. So, and there's a lot of programs that are out there that are all focused on this kind of thing. You remember when ropes programs were all the rage?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone
Yeah,
remember
Sure.
that?
I
Yeah.
was a ropes instructor.
Yeah, well, there you go. So climbing through the trees, and almost always in those ropes courses, there was the trust fall exercise.
Mm-hmm.
So someone standing up on, I don't know, a little foot high bench or whatever, and they just have to turn their back to a group of people and just fall backwards and have that faith that they're going to be caught. But yeah, so that's what it's really all about. They need that. Meanwhile, the people that are too far outgrid, who are too aggressive, too forceful, the people that are out there, those A-type personalities and all that live out here in driver, not just on 12 activities like we were looking at for several of you, but on 1,200 activities. Everything is very far outgrid. They need, they are someone who needs to be counseled about suitability. Not always are they suitable, but is their approach, are their tactics suitable for what's going on? And that's when you need to bring in you, the counselor, to help the person recognize that how they happen to be behaving. And by the way, usually we only do in-grid maneuvers, or we only work with this situation when they're in the danger zone. That's why I'm squiggling around out here. Healthy drivers are great, wonderful. Be there as much as you can on all the things you really want to accomplish in life. But if you're going to get this far out grid and live this far out grid, we got some real work we need to do, because you could be just burning bridges, ruining relationships, hurting everybody and yourself in the process, but you're just barreling through. So this is because how you're approaching things are unsuitable, and we need to give you more suitable ways to go about doing things. So that's your quick review of the 4 uns.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, so let's go ahead and anyone else want to see their grids? I don't know if the rest of you that are actually on the call. I already did, Chris. Tim, do take a moment to fill yours out so we can show it to you next time. Kathy, likewise. Boris. Oh, Boris, you want to see yours? You can unmute, otherwise you're going to see it anyway, just saying. All right. So this is Boris's.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry about my mute button.
no
I'm here.
worries, Boris. Boris is giving us something to really work with. So, because he's got, we would refer to these as camps have formed. So he's got one thing up here, activity number 3, for whatever reason, has him quite far up grid, sticking to his plan. Now look at this. Everything else, he gave his ability a 9, a 10, an 11, but sticking to his plan, he gave himself a 5. And he gave the challenge an 11 right there. How many of you want to say, Boris, what's happening when it comes
Boris, what is happening?
right, sticking to your plan? You know, what's going
Look at all those
on?
green circles. Holy smoke, you're my hero.
Okay, so Boris, you want to tell us a little bit about why does number 3 right now feel so much more challenging and you know, pulling your perceived ability into question?
I think it's because there's so many opportunities coming at me at the same time that I feel I can't focus on all the things that I really want to focus on. And primarily, it's most of those are tied to other people. So my dissatisfaction is in trying to get other people. I have to pull them along as opposed to me being able to run as fast as I possibly can if it was all dependent on me.
Right. And so by the end of the day, other people have stuck to their plan and gotten things done, but you never got around to your plan. Is that what it feels like sometimes?
No, it feels like that the pace at which I'm trying to execute my plan, which is dependent on them, is much faster than they are. And so I feel like I'm having to drag them along.
Okay, so it really is this idea that you can't stick to your plan unless they are doing the things that they need to be doing. Right there, I would say to you guys, from the professional perspective, I would say, Boris, we need to create an activity list specific to this situation that you're looking at. So not just this one activity, but sticking to your plan, because I've heard you now offer up a lot of other activities. So getting other people to match the pace, get done what you need them to have done in the right framework, you know, so that you can actually pursue all the opportunities. When you first mentioned it, I thought, well, the reason why he can't stick to his plan is because as he begins a day, more opportunities are arriving in his email or on his desk. And he's going like, wait, I got to go look at that. That's good. That's good. And so sometimes the reason why we can't stick to our plan isn't because negative things are happening, but it can also be because too many positive things are happening all at once. And so that's why, you know, we consider the change grid to be a tool of conversation. So yeah, so Boris, very curious about this, about everything else.
Yeah, for me, I think it's a combination of both aspects. It's maybe too many opportunities too fast for me to try to take advantage of. And then the other aspect, which I brought up, which is other people and trying to pull them along at the same pace.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's making it frustrating for me to manage day to day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I forget which program we tend to focus it on. I think it's in the accountable self. We talk about that choice is one of the most powerful yet dangerous things a human is expected to do. And the reason for it is because the moment you limit your choices are going to limit you. And it's almost un-American for someone to have their choices limited. But, you know, we
Mhm.
got too many choices. We only have so many resources, so much energy. It's really tough, but we don't want to miss out on things. We don't want to do whatever. And so it's sometimes it's very difficult for people to actually just choose, particularly if the choice they need to make is to shut off all of those additional opportunities long enough to focus on the one you've already chosen. You with me? So
Mhm.
choosing is a very powerful thing to do, but it's also a very, I don't want to say it's dangerous in and of itself. It feels like it's dangerous because, you know, you don't want to miss out on things. But the moment you limit your choices are going to limit you. So, okay. Anyway, but point is, if you look at Boris's, he's got a lot of things very, very far down grid. Now, yeah, I would say, okay, well, Boris, maybe we can look at how you might want to be able to raise the bar on some of these. So you're doing them really, really well. Is there a way to raise the bar enough to get you re-engaged in them? Or is the truth is they take care of themselves quite nicely? Thank you very much. You know, these are so natural for you. Uh, and if that's the case, then I would go like, all right, fine, but let's look at 10 and 12 and 4 and 8. So 4, 8, 10, 12. These are the ones that are actively in play. Actively in
Mhm.
play. So 4, enforcing non-negotiable boundaries to protect your time and well-being. Excellent. That's very close. That, by the way, ideal location would be 10, 10. So very nicely positioned for that one. Number 8, managing creative avoidance to ensure I focus on high impact tasks that align with my goals, with my my primary goals. That's a great spot to be on that one as well. You know, these are all plotting, you know, very nicely. I would be wondering, are you thinking as you filled it out about managing your own creative avoidance or managing the creative avoidance of the people you're counting on?
No, myself
Okay.
in this case.
And so fine, because if you are up in power stress for activity number 3, because you're waiting on other people, I would certainly say that one of the activities I would put on the deeper dive list for this one is managing creative avoidance in other people. Because you want them to
Mhm.
put all their energy into whatever needs to be done so that you can do the things that you need to do.
Mhm.
If we look at number 10, managing the expectations and responsibilities I place upon myself, not a bad location at all for that smack dab balance driver. Number 12, surrounding myself with people who support me. This is really good. Usually we consider that to be more of a driven, amiable driver over here, but having it plotted an analytical driver just means that you've figured out who those people are. You're being more
Mhm.
selective in who you've sought out and added to your resources, et cetera. Does that match for you?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, yeah, anyway, so it's interesting because you have a little bit of a scatter going on, but where mine is like an explosion occurred, you still have these camps that have formed. And camping is a
Mhm.
really interesting way to look at how people have chosen to plot on the change grid. All right. So anyway, anytime any of you guys really do want to have a private reading, you just let me know. I'm happy to help you work through whatever it is. I would say to you though, I don't know that you want a private reading on one of these exploration grids we're doing as much as I would encourage you to put together your own activity list. And let's look what's going on, the things that really do matter the most to you. All right. So this is an exploration more than a deep dive. All right, well, we're pretty much at the top of the hour, so let me just kind of go back to this one. I don't want all of them. I only want to see activity number 1, those core goals. Let's look at everybody, how they all plotted, view the change grid. And you can see that while there may not be scatter experienced inside of you guys individually, when it comes to this particular activity, even though the average plotting is so close to the ideal location, can you guys see and appreciate that this scatter can't really be ignored? Right, because we've got people in our team, we've got people in our family, we've got people in our company or whatever it is who are viewing this activity in dramatically different ways. So when it came to Tom's not on the call, but Tom's up here solidly in power stress about it. Up-grid intention, but not engagement yet. We already
Yeah.
talked about the mess that is me at the moment. We're up-grid about it, but I've got two people. So Edie and Boris, they're both quite far down-grid about it. Can you imagine if we were actually functioning as a team that saw one another frequently? The resource that Edie and Boris represent to me and Tom, is there something that they have figured out that if they share that, I mean, look, they gave their ability a 10 or an 11. We're giving our ability a 6. So maybe, just maybe, there's something we can learn from them to help us move further down grid, closer to the ideal location. The rest of all y'all are darn close to the ideal location, even though, Bob might be over here and let's see, David's over here a little bit. You're still within a point or two of the ideal location. And so I may not be as concerned about you guys as I am concerned about the people that are plotting further upgrid or downgrid. So I think this hopefully shows you that this as a tool for a manager to be using in more of a business kind of a setting, or a family, if you got a larger family like Brian, you could really put together an activity list for all of your family members and see where people are plotting. They're not all going to plot on the same spot, but you need to be able to manage that family, if you will.
That's probably a good idea.
Brian, that would be interesting if you put your whole family on there and put your own change grid and had them respond to it.
Yep.
I agree. Very interesting.
Yeah, and if that feels dangerous, risky to start off with, there's no reason why I can't say, Brian, I want you to answer on their behalf. They're your family. You know these people. How would they rate their ability? How would they rate the challenge? Even though it may not be exactly what they would say if they answered it themselves, it could still help you gain some insights just based on your understanding, your prediction. And by the way, regardless of how one of your sisters might feel about something, you perceive them as feeling a particular way. And you're going to operate based on your perceptions, not only of yourself, but your perceptions of others and, well, pretty much everything that's in the environment is around you. So ultimately, they might say, oh, no, my actual answer is this and this for ability and challenge. And you're kind of going like, that's not how I perceive you. So.
In fact, I think I'll do that exercise now that I'm, back in South Africa. That's why I used my actual surname is actual Mwangi before my father changed it. So I'm feeling kind of saucy right now. So I think I might do that.
All righty. Well, good. Give it a try. Give it a try. And
I think it's also good for couples.
Yep.
Or maybe two friends, or
Or
to
anybody.
find out how you feel about different, maybe something that you both are going through and you need to find out where that person stands.
Yep. And Linda, you can also use this at the organizational level. So Linda's active in a lot of different groups, and she's on the board of them, and et cetera, officers. So they keep wanting her to have a higher position. She's not all eager about doing all that, but you can see when it comes to something like subject A, boosting membership or whatever, if you said, well, here's all the people that are actively working around that, where are they plotting when it comes to these tasks that need to be performed? So there's a limitless ways that you can use the change grid, but you don't always have to pull other people into it. Sometimes you can answer it vicariously.
T, that's an interesting example, because you could also figure out who the people are that are burned out.
Yep.
Because we've lost several really wonderful people in the last year because they just worked so hard, they worked themselves to death.
Yep. And that's important, because if the change grid can give you a little bit of a warning that burnout is happening, then you could definitely, do something to at least start to explore it, if not something to remedy it.
Yeah,
Okay,
when you said membership, the person we lost was the most amazing woman in membership, and she did everything on the local level, state, national. She just said, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. And she was amazing at membership.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden she just said, I'm done, and left.
Yep. So,
But if we would have had a change grid on her, we could have saw it coming that she was deep in apathy, or maybe really high in stress, to tell you the truth.
Yep. And this is an important thing. This is why, I know this is the oracle of the self, and we really do want to focus as much as we can about how you guys can use these principles and these techniques to help yourself get to the better place. You can't help but let it spill into all areas of your life, because you start noticing how other people are responding. And while you might have had some sense of what's going on, if you can just say, how are they thinking about their ability right now? How are they thinking about challenge, or how important do they think this is right now? You start to just ask these questions. What you really are doing is vicariously completing a change grid for them. And so, yeah, lots of good insights.
I think that's important, because I always tend to believe that our relationships as individuals, how we relate not just with people, but with things, environment, that's reflecting you.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to understand that. In fact, that's where I often start. Like, I talk about my sisters a lot, but what I'm really judging is a lot of times my inability to respond, because I always say, hey, if I know them. So if I know
that's
them,
good,
why
because
does it trigger me?
Yeah, Brian, you should know that as you've shared stories about your sisters, none of us judge your sisters. We just judge you.
Right.
Because it really is about you.
Right.
All we know, these women don't even exist.
Oh yeah, they exist. There's too many of them.
I want a picture. I want a picture.
Yeah, the serious point there, though, is that it really is about your perceptions of them.
Yeah, exactly.
How you've interpreted whatever's been going on, the meaning you've attached to it. That's
Right.
where the real interest is. So I would actually be more interested to see how your perceptions of them are plotting than how they would actually be plotting.
I definitely have some perceptions.
I'm sure you do. Okay, our time's pretty much up, but I just wanted to give you a preview. We will start with activity number 2 next time around, and this is what activity number 2 looks like right now. And by the way, that activity is about planning your day. Planning your day. And I'll just say this, we'll get in a deeper dive later. All y'all are plotting further upgrade than the ideal location. Planning your day is an absolute analytical task. And you guys are certainly scattered a bit away from there. This is where I'd say we got to get you guys more into that analytical energy, and none of you are in it. A couple of you are on the border of it, but nobody's really in that analytical energy for getting it done. Now, a couple of you, I and L, you're down in power, apathy, and apathy. You're down in the analytical quadrant. So you're definitely analytical about it, but perhaps analytical to the point where it's become more automatic, more procedural.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be good, but it could also be less attentive to that task than the ideal location would offer.
Mm-hmm.
All right, anyway, we'll talk about it more later. So hopefully you guys are finding this interesting, and you will do it. Those who haven't filled it out yet, please find a few moments to fill it out, and you'll be able to see your results reflected next time we're talking. So with that, any final comments, questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, T.
You're welcome. Okay, take care, everybody. We'll talk again very soon.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.